Good evening or good overnight if you happen to be in Europe. Good morning if you're on Australia or Asia or anywhere else in the world. Welcome to the final race in the Aegis Shield group of the Adamant Cup group round. I am Nth, and joining me today on the restream today is Neobari behind the scenes doing the actual restreaming, Black Ice on the tracking, and my co-commentator tonight, CS Radical, here for this race between Xyrak at 2 and 2 and Vitasia at 1 and 3. How are you feeling tonight, CS? This is a very, very important race for these two runners.
I'm feeling super tense. The stakes on this one, it's for Xyrak, it's literally win and you make the tiebreaker. If you don't, it's over, and we have our tiebreaker between, I had it up here, Beauty and Discovery and Elven Sorrow. Otherwise, this is going to be really, really fun to watch, because we got one person specifically we're keeping an eye on because it's up to them, and then after that, we just got to hope and see what the seed gives us, which, given the flag set, this could be a very interesting seed, particularly once we start getting underground.
Yeah, what strikes me about these objectives that we're seeing today, we're seeing Cure the Fever with the Sand Ruby, Baron Castle, Super Cannon, Giant, both Fey Marches, and the Pink Tail. There is no required objective on the moon. So unless there is a key item that we need out of the 6 that we need to complete the seed up on that moon, well, we might not even see that come into play today, and that sort of question to me has been the biggest question in the tournament. When do you go to the moon, and how long do you stay there?
And we say that, but by this logic, we got 4 key items we're going to have to find. Watch all 4 of them be on the moon somehow, and specifically in the LST, not even cave value, all in the 4 or 5 checks. Like, it's just that kind of silliness that you come to expect at this point.
Absolutely. One thing worth noting too before we get into this race, we do have Night Dew who's going to be going on to the bracket stage with a 4-1 in this group, and that one loss was to Xyrak in their race earlier in the tournament. So really, this is a very, very interesting situation in which the competitor who managed to give the eventual group winner their only loss in the group stages might not even make it to the bracket stage.
Yeah, and it's kind of the funny way that these things work too, sometimes with the seeds being the way that they can be, even if, we're talking one of the better runners, it always takes just one weird thing and you can win. And sometimes you get these weird situations, like you just said, where potentially the only person that Night Dew lost to in the group stage might not even make it, just on the basis of, well, the other 3 matches that Xyrak had that he lost just might not have swung his way, maybe some extra luck on the other end. There's so many different ways that this could be going. So speaking of many different ways, let's see how we're starting with that Rosa starting and Iridia. And hey, we found our underground access too with that hook.
We found our underground access and one of those 6 key items that's required for completing the seed at this point, because we need that hook to trade in the Pink Tail for that 7th objective there. So that is a very, very spicy start here. What do you do if you're in this situation where you have a Rosa, you have Iridia, you have access to that Cave Evelyn character, which is a gated character, could be something quite useful there? Do you just go and check that right away? Do you maybe check that, swing over to Castle Evelyn, or do you just play the seed as usual? And it looks like both of our runners are just going to opt to go up and check Bedward first.
Yeah, I mean, you might find there could be some real spice here if the Darkness Crystal happens to be here. You probably take a quick check, get a couple of easy things out of the way first, and then obviously you'll be looking at characters. Maybe you check Hobbs first, see what you're starting with there. If you're really wanting to take a bit of an extra path, maybe you take a look at that character there in Evelyn. A tail, but not the tail, so a rat tail might lead to something, so I guess we'll be seeing that check done pretty quickly too. But yeah, again, I think they'll be feeling out the seed a little bit first before they take that Evelyn check, but I don't think it'll take too long, especially if they look at both Hobbs and Baron and the characters aren't quite what they're looking for.
Definitely. Now we see both runners running through this public treasury here. We did see an exit for both of them right away. So that's quite good, as that Rosa will not learn exit until we get through, if we even get through, the Tower of Zot later in the seed. Also seeing an Ogre Axe for a character we don't have. Nothing particularly exciting here in that treasury, but that exit's good for shaving off a couple seconds if you want to use it, say, on the way out of Antlion Cave.
It's just a real shame. You figured this little green-haired child will be able to pick up this gigantic axe, you know? It's kind of a shame.
You know, Rosa seems like the type who could use an axe if it really got down to it. You know, let Rosa hit things in a berserker style as opposed to just as an archer. I think that's going to be an interesting possibility if we figure out a way to break the game to make that happen. But I don't think that's happening today, and I don't think that would necessarily be something we would want to see happen today. But you never know.
I don't know, you were speaking my language for a minute there. It looks like, though, Vitasia maybe either checking that rat tail immediately or maybe checking the character. It looks like Xyrak might be doing the exact same thing, which makes sense. That's a free, another key item check. Also, you got a character potentially. Oh, actually, it looks like Vitasia is at least going to see what Rydia's free summon is.
Yep, you take Rydia to the start of Mount Hobbs. She gets a free summon, no guarantees on what it is, and that, I believe, is Titan, which could be useful if we get the MP for it, but not the big ticket like Leviathan or Bahamut you might be hoping for there.
No, and you almost kind of go into that check assuming you won't get it, because good lord, that does not happen often. Usually it's something funny like Cockatrice or Imp.
Very interesting play here from Vitasia, actually going to go ahead and go up that side of Mount Hobbs instead. Knows that he has that exit, can just exit back out instead of walking this whole distance, doesn't have to fly back over to the other side. Very useful. Meanwhile, Xyrak, going to turn in this rat tail, looking in Silvera, manages to find a dancing dagger sitting over in the grass, and that is a very, very good pickup when you're sitting on that Rydia right now.
Picking up some vampires as well. Nice little pickup for this early game too. But yeah, we'll see what that rat tail offers.
How about some flavor of Mylon for a Cid? It is Mylon and friends, so the easier of the two in this case. And a magma key from that rat tail, so that hook route not going to be required today.
Well, I'm sure all runners will be relieved to see that. Now, we may still see the check be done for the character, but at least for the time being, we'll probably see at least Xyrak go, I would assume, maybe down. Oh no, looks like going to check the character first. Or maybe just putting down the hovercraft for now. But either way, you'll be able to get a quick freebie check-in as well. So there's some different options you can do with this now.
Yeah, I quite like this. I feel like if you're going to go and check that Eblin character, you might as well do it right now. You know you're not going to need to go back down this hook route, so you're not really at risk of double dipping the Eblin cave unless there's something here in a shop, which is not that far to get to. Might as well just get that very quick, potentially powerful character out of the way and hopefully use that to carry you through the early game of the seed. Does find Bacchus wines and hourglasses here, and I think we're about to see a very big sale here.
And as we see in the inventory, like we mentioned earlier, that you do have that exit, so if that character doesn't happen to be a Tella, well, you got a pretty easy way to get out of that cave without the long walk back out, so.
Yeah, definitely. And to me, that is sort of the defining factor of this flag set and the defining characteristic of this tournament. It's all about how you use the resources that you get early on. You know, we get that early exit. If Xyrak's using it to check the character and Vitasia's also using it to check the character and going back out of Mount Hobbs, you know, that's still different ways of using it. One's going to be slightly more time shaved off than the other, but they're both going to be very different, very impactful uses of that exit in the end.
Yeah, 100%. So we see, well, it's a Dragoon. Not the best thing you're hoping for, but hey, it's a welcome addition at this juncture. Although I believe Xyrak did sell at Ogreax, so Kayn might be relatively weaponless in terms of overall power for a little while, but we'll see how the treasure chest change that.
Yeah, definitely. I don't think we really have anything. Obviously, if he goes back and checks the treasure chest on the way back, you know, drops a save, looks for the trapped one, just takes everything else that could be a way around it. But outside of that, this Cid almost feels like the better of the two options compared to that Kayn over on Xyrak's side, just at the moment. Not long term, but just right now.
And looks like you're completely on the mark there. Xyrak doing that save, going to start probably taking some chests on the way out. Doesn't appear to be grabbing all of them, maybe just the ones on the immediate path. There is a big chunk here that you can take from, so we'll see what that leads to us.
Slumber Sword is a start. It's not great, but it is a start. Another Dancing Dagger here, so that's going to even out the advantage that Vitasia found with that Dancing Dagger, No, wait, Xyrak is the one who found the dancing dagger. If Vitasia comes back here later, then we'll find that dancing dagger and even out Xyrak's advantage. My mistake.
And also a couple hourglasses, so a nice find. Don't have to worry about spending some extra money in shops when you do come across them. That's 2 already. That can give you at least a little bit of versatility in a few battles, even just the grinds if you really want to go there.
Absolutely. Over on Vitasia's side, going down here into the Antlion Cave, finding an Asura as boss here. This Asura will not last very long. This is a pretty open and shut case, I think. Well, that Cure 3 is going to slow it down slightly, but still.
It's not a bad fight to come across here. It's one of those bosses that you do like to see in an earlier portion because, not necessarily because it can be too hard, although Asura can be punchy in some spots, but because the fight can drag on so long in different areas when the HP is really high and maybe your damage isn't as good, it's not as great. But here, even though it is a little bit slow, you're okay with it here because you know you can at least beat any of the spells that Asura is kind of fighting, so it's not too bad.
Getting Jin off with that Grimoire there does a nice tidy 600 damage. I think this is yet Asura down, and we'll see what this Antlion Cave is going to give us today.
But first we have to wait for Riddy to learn at least like 15 spells. Ooh, so it's the pass. It's one of those items that in this kind of a seed, especially this early, you're almost kind of disappointed to see it, even though you know it's going to come in handy later. But it's one of those things you're like, look, I don't hate seeing you, but I kind of would have wished it was something else first.
It's really interesting because to me, the pass, as much as it seems like it shouldn't really affect routing as much as it does, is one of those items that can really, really change how you approach a seed. If you have that pass in hand, you get that darkness crystal, there is a certain temptation if you can take on the moon to just go through the moon, clear it out, and never look back. Never have to go back, you just go back through the pass when it's time to fight Zeromus, and I think that's one of those things where there is a possible world in which one of our runners having that pass in the inventory decides, you know what, I'm going to get the moon out of the way now, get the XP from it, get that dense amount of key item checks, and just not worry about the rest.
And if that's the case too, it'd make perfect sense because this flag set, depending on the boss locations, you're going to want levels a lot because you're taking on essentially the 4 toughest boss battles, not counting Z, because you're getting all the high level location spots here in this seed, having to do both Fey March bosses and the Giant.
Definitely. Xyrak looked like he was going to go underground, but it seems to have just been opening up. Deciding doesn't want to take that Sid, just going to go ahead and reset here. Meanwhile, we're having to sort of crisscross as Vitasia's heading into the Eblin Cave and going to go pick up his cane. So that's going to be an interesting little inflection point here. Vitasia will have 4 characters. Xyrak will only have 3 unless he decides to quickly hop through Dwarf Castle while he's here, and I don't think he has the power for it.
No, at this point too, with Kane only being at base level, and like we said, that Ogre Axe isn't in hand as well, I imagine that's probably a big part too. Xyrak just trying to check shops so you can find a decent spear. The Gugnir spear is not bad, but you also think, hey, there's some chests here, I'll probably raid that first, see if I find anything interesting, or at worst case, I can sell a few more things. That way I'm not losing all of my funds.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the question that always rings in my mind when I'm looking at shops in this flag set is it worth it? And the answer to me is almost always no, not really that worth it to get that Gungnir if you're just going to replace it later, unless you're really planning on just using that cane throughout the entire seed anyways. Like, you're looking for a better option long term. The chances of you finding a better option pretty high. It's a bit hard to justify that. Also, to quickly answer a question from chat, no, we have not seen who is on the Kaipo bed yet.
And at the same time too, like, you also have to sit there and think in the back of your mind, if I buy this thing right now, what are the chances that I find this later? And well, it changed with Xyrak finding that Leviathan in the item shop, so now the question doesn't become, do we find a cane weapon? It's how soon until we find that Leviathan summon in another chest, just to make things fun. Because it almost seems to be bound to happen.
Definitely. It's one of those things where Leviathan online early is a way through a lot of your underground too. So Xyrak finding that summon, pretty well set now. Doesn't necessarily have to worry about that Kane, and that's not going to make, if I were in his shoes, not going to make me more tempted to want to go and try and buy a Gungnir Spear that I'm just going to try and get rid of later.
Yeah, and the logic's pretty sound. The Gungnir Spear is 66,000, whereas the Leviathan's 40,000. The Leviathan usually hits harder and more people, so it's kind of an easy trade at that point.
Yeah, definitely. Xyrak looking like he's going to head down to the Feymarch next, and so we'll see what the freak item is down here, and we'll get our first peek at two of our objective bosses, the King and Queen, down here.
Meantime, Vitasia finding that heroin robe, and also finding the Sailman trap. Looks to be maybe thinking about doing it. You do have the hourglass, so it does make it a little bit more doable, although it doesn't really help when they bully the person about to cast that hourglass.
Yeah, it has the Sid, so Sid should be able to get that hourglass off, and does. You just revive your party from here, get through there. I did not quite see what that was. Looks like a power shirt off of the Feymarch chest, so something that'll help that Kane a little bit, but again, we don't really have weapons for him yet, so not the best prize.
And the upside too, again, because Vitasia did keep that Ogre Axe, that is going to make the Staleman fight a lot faster as well.
Yeah, one of those things where you almost forget sometimes how powerful those bonuses can be until you have a situation exactly like this, where if you didn't have this bonus, it would be such a long fight. But instead, it's only going to be, one swing from Sid hitting for 2.5k on each one, and they are both down. We'll see what the reward is.
Yeah, it might be real worth it too. Well, that's not bad. At least it's one less thing you have to think about buying.
I do not like those Feymarch bosses at all. That is King Golbez, which, is something that you can get through, but it's going to be real annoying getting there. And most importantly, Queen Demist at an extremely fast spot. That Demist is going to be swinging and going invulnerable very, very quickly. There is no world in which that is going to be a fast boss until you're hitting for practical quad nines.
Yeah, it's evil not because they might be too difficult. I mean, Demist might be a little irritatingly powerful, but this is more like, okay, you have to do these two fights, and they ain't going to be short.
Yeah, Demist is one of those, quotation marks free fights to me once you get the right setup for it. If we had maybe a second Blink caster, I would say that it is completely and 100% free. But right now, we're only really looking at Rosa with Blink, and as long as she lives to that first Mist phase, she should be able to get Blink up on the whole party, and they should be able to swing away just basically for free. But it's going to be rough getting there unless we get another source of that to sort of mitigate the damage that's going to be going out.
I mean, once you're really powerful, it's not a lot of HP you have to do. It's 23,000, but it's still difficult to do when it's that fast, making 3 attacks and gonna disappear and take quite a bit of time out of your run. So, yeah, it's not exactly a fight that's making you sweat. It's more of a fight that's just making you just have a big, really big sigh.
That Feymarch is like a dentist's office visit. You need to go to the dentist every now and again. Good dental health, it's very important. Got to take care of your luxury bones. No one wants to schedule that dentist visit. No one wants it to be tomorrow. And that is where we are with King Golbez and Queen Demist right now.
You keep calling the office over and over just to push the appointment back because you don't really want to go yet.
I can't. I'm getting my hair cut that day. Sorry. I'm very, very busy. I don't want this root canal of a Golbez fight today, please.
Can we push it back like another couple weeks? I'm
Exactly.
sure I'll be ready by then.
I'll come back when there's an immediate problem I can't deal with, but we
or when there's nothing left.
Exactly. You know what? Sign me up for dentures. I'm just getting around this seed the other way around.
I mean, it makes you think too, especially with Giant being a quest, I feel like Giant might actually get done long before we get to this point. I think our Feymarch might be the last thing we see our runners do, unless the seed unless Darkness Crystal is behind one of those two. Then in which case, oops.
See, I think if I were in this situation, this is again one of those great examples of how many different ways you can have of playing these flags. If I were in this situation, I would be tempted to say, all right, I'm going to get through this Fabul fight like Xyrak is doing. This Antlion's not going to really pose a threat, although it is going to knock over Rosa. I would be like, get through Ordeals, get through Baron Inn, get through Dwarf Castle. Then I kind of want to do the Fey March, because that's 2 key item locations that are possible there. And I really, really want those 2 key item checks, because if my opponent leaves that off until later, I just won the race. And speaking of things that'll definitely help in winning this race, Xyrak finding another objective here at Fabul, finding that Baron key.
And it's also a good sign too, not even just because of an objective, but because, well, your party's not doing too hot right now, and Baron will at least give you one more crack at the can, so not a bad pickup this early in the run when, especially with a party of Rosa, Kayn, and Rydia, you're kind of hoping for something to really put this over a little bit more. Could be a Fu, could be a Cecil, even a Pala might just help a little bit just to have some extra damage output, but we'll see.
Well, speaking of things we'll see, Xyrak just found a Darkness Crystal at Sheila 1. Do you check that character, or do you wait? That is a big, big question, because we still have Baron Inn where we haven't seen the character. We still have Baron Castle where we haven't seen the character. But that character that's on the moon is going to help get through those 2 checks at the cost of that, 50-ish seconds worth of cutscenes for doing it, plus the raising the whale, which you're going to have to do eventually anyways, so that kind of doesn't count. What do you do when you get that Darkness Crystal? Do you try and see what that character is and hope that it's one that's going to carry you through the seed?
Yeah, you kind of wonder too, is, having Leviathan, as we just saw Xyrak throw up on Rydia, you wonder, okay, can I keep Rydia alive that I can do both the inn and the castle without too much problem? Because the levels are still pretty low, some of these bosses can hit you pretty hard. So do you check that Darkness character in hopes that maybe you find a Fu or an Edge or somebody that at least can take a couple of extra hits, so that way you can maybe protect your Rydia a little bit more to get that Leviathan off? I mean, especially just getting a 4th party member too would help a lot, because that's just another body to take another shot.
Yeah, I think that's kind of a big question, and the simplest way that I can put it, in the way I would think about it right now when I'm watching and not necessarily when I'm playing, because when I'm playing I'd be like, ooh, free character, I want to go see what this is. The question is, will that character make up that 50 seconds you're going to spend flying to and from? And I'm not all that sure that there is a world in which that happens. If it's a Cecil, we don't have any Cecil equipment, although Vitasia over here in the Sylph Cave opening those 2 chests, finding a White Spear for that Kayn. If it's a Fu might help depending on what spells he has to get through. If it's an Edge can help, but it's not one of those situations where I think that you make up that time necessarily, at least not right now.
Yeah, it really is. It really is more of a gamble at this point of you just saying okay, I'm really not comfortable with this party. I really want to try to find something to make this better. So in Xyrak's case, having only 3 members, none of them really pushing anything over the edge right now. I mean, Leviathan will help, but you're kind of at a point where you're at a bit of a crossroads, because you're sitting there thinking, okay, if I do this, I might lose something, but if I don't do this and it ends up being something really good, maybe that loses too. It really is a tough spot to be in.
Yeah, definitely. I know Xyrak has landed outside of Baron, going to go ahead and heal up, save up. Probably going to do the Baron Inn check first here, so we'll see what that character is very shortly. Meanwhile, Vitasia has headed back to Fabul to turn in Sheila 1, get that Darkness Crystal, probably do the defense while he's here, get that Baron key. That is a Porum. That's not the most exciting Baron Inn character.
Yeah, that's not going to suddenly make you go, okay, now I definitely don't need to check Darkness. Now that would make me think twice a little bit. And you start up to wonder too, do I have a party that can deal with a boss at Baron that might be a little troublesome? Not terribly, because Baron isn't usually too bad. But at the levels that they're at, especially with all your characters not having a lot of HP to work with, it's not the most ideal party to walk into the castle with still.
I believe that first boss too is a Mom Bomb. And that is deeply unfortunate for an early Baron play, because that Mom Bomb is going to have all that bonus HP that is going to make that fight even more painful to get through at this point. I'm not entirely sure how excited to be for that. Blue Robe over on Xyrak's side, it is just Water Tag. Oh, was it a Lunar Sparkle? I am just misremembering that. My mistake.
Well, at this point with Water Hag, you're happy to see that here because generally the boss in the second slot can be a little bit heavier than you think it would be sometimes at this point in the game, but because it's Water Hag, all you gotta do is manage 3 hits and you're out.
Yeah, I'm curious on Xyrak's side if he might be considering trying to use this Rosa as an anchor right now, because she's been on the floor for a lot of these fights that give experience. Obviously, this one doesn't actually give XP, so it's not a big deal, but she's not really getting anywhere for this early game, and that's a big question mark here. Is that part of the plan with that Rydia really online with Leviathan? Only getting a Mirasame in addition to this Porum, so not the most exciting pickup that we got here when we already have a Rosa in the party.
Yeah, it's a pretty tough Baronin to go through when you only get a Porum, which, look, we ain't hating Porum that hard on this, but it's not exactly the character you were hoping to find with your current setup. And then when you only get an Edge Sword and you have no edge in sight, you're not feeling the greatest walking in.
Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things where Porum can really, really shine in a lot of the things that you can get in this flag. Say you get a really good bow, you get a good heroine robe, you know. Porum is a really strong character when you get the right equipment for her to carry you through the early game, but we haven't even seen that. And again, anything that she can do, Rosa can do as well, and Rosa's going to have more HP later, so it's kind of really just not a great pickup right now. Even if you were planning on trying to use like Rosa as an anchor, and that's why you were keeping her on the ground, that Porum's going to be a better anchor.
Yeah. And we'll see how that plays out, especially with these two bosses, especially if there's a real ugly boss in the Bygone slot with that Sparkle. Vitasia, in the meantime, getting that Baron Key and that Darkness Crystal, looks to be raising the big whale, maybe checking the character, maybe even thinking about the moon. Hard to tell.
I think it's one of those things where you're looking at the moon from an is there a free boss perspective, but not necessarily from an I want to full clear the whole thing right now perspective. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Vitasia dip down into cave value and just see who the boss is down there. You know, drop a save outside, reset if it's not something you can handle at that point in time, and just try and sneak something that Xyrak might not necessarily have gone for.
Yeah, it's, you know, this game is going to be, especially with the way the flag set, or not the flag set, the objectives are, you're going to have an interesting set of gambles that people or runners will eventually have to try to make, because with the way that things might be running, depending on how you're feeling, whether you feel like you're ahead or you feel like you're way behind, you know, there might be a gamble here and there that they think might pay off and might save a lot of extra time that might backfire. We'll just see as we go, because this seed, for all we know, like, everything that could be left could be on the moon. That might be a late check. Everything else might just be hiding behind the 2 Fame March bosses. You don't know. There could be a 4-item chain. Anything is possible at this point still. It's very early.
I think it really just is down to how much are you willing to gamble. And, you know, everything about these objectives, everything about this whole setup is kind of screaming at you, do not go to the moon. You don't need to go to the moon. Don't go there unless you have to. And so if those key items are on the moon and you're the one who went to the moon, your opponent isn't, you just won the game. So it is a little bit down to whether or not you want to take that risk. Vitasia finding Sirens here in the moon shop, that is a pretty big bonus as well.
Yeah, for checking Darkness early to know now you have your grinds set if you are really desperate for some extra levels, that is going to take a huge load off of your mind now.
Yeah, definitely. Especially if you just want a few early levels, you know, get that Rydia a bit more health, get that Rosa some health. You can go pop an egg in the underground, almost certainly one-shot it with Leviathan, and just get that experience boost right away. Only a Yang up here on the moon, so this is not the biggest bonus that Vitasia could have gotten in terms of characters here.
Yeah, you were definitely hoping for something else. This was not going to be it. So don't think, yeah, not gonna, oh, maybe, oh. I forgot, Vitasia doesn't have Leviathan on this one. It's Xyrak that found the Leviathan at Dwarf Castle. I don't believe Vitasia checked that yet.
I don't really dislike this play. I think if you're going to get a Yang, you want a Yang basically right now at this very, very early juncture where he can start getting levels because he scales so much harder off of levels. But I think if you're going to get a bald character, Xyrak finding Fu here is a lot more important than that Yang is going to be.
Yeah, that's going to be a bit of a different trade-off here, that's for sure. Especially if Fu has some nice spells to start already. I'm not sure how many levels he would have at this point. Feels like, I'm trying to do the math here, somewhere around 5 or 6, I want to say. Maybe a little bit more even. Counting's hard, okay?
It certainly is possible that he has one of the big name spells, has, you know, Nuke or Quake or even Virus at this point. But I'm not sure it's particularly likely. Vitasia going to go ahead and do the Hairdryer's chest here on the moon. I really like this play. This is another good chance at spiking one of those real big items.
Yep.
And now having that Stardust Rod.
And having Hourglass 3, you can take your sweet time. It's going to be a while before those Hairdryers turn back on. So you got some time to work with. Get yourself set up. Get these things down. Hopefully get some nice levels and really get this run started.
You do have to be a little bit careful though, as the moon is normally quite cold, and having those hair dryers not running is going to cause the temperature to dip, so we do need to make sure that we get them down before that becomes a problem. But I think with this Gaia drum going off, not really going to be a problem here.
Well, I mean, you could also make the argument maybe Vitasia wants to stay cool and calm, you know, so...
Exactly, you know, but it's gotta be in moderation with everything in these flags. You know, you can't be too cool and calm or you're gonna just lose time all over the place. But you can't be panicky because then that's when you start missing things. And if you miss something in these flags, you could be throwing the race away.
Well, as we see Xyrak now checking Dwarf Castle, I think that was Leviathan hopping around in the background.
Which is really interesting. How does Leviathan hops like Rattly the Snake in Donkey Kong Country 2?
Look. I'm not a biologist. I couldn't help you too hard on that one. I just see Water Dragon just jump. I see Water Dragon hop. That's all I want to know. I just want to see.
Right. That Hairdryer's chest is down over on Vitasia's foot side. Getting a light sword for it would be good if he finds Cecil later on. And most importantly, getting both Blink and Berserk onto that Rosa, which could be very, very big to have already at this point in time.
And especially if you do come across that Cecil relatively soon, you know, that would definitely help. Although we know at this point, unless something else gets unlocked later that can lead to it quickly, that is not going to be in the future anytime soon, because we know Baron is Porum and we know Baron Castle is Fu. So at this point, unless, you know, we find a Sand Ruby pretty early in the next little while, we aren't going to see potentially somebody for that light sword. No DKC just yet.
I'm very interested in where Vitasia goes from here. Looks like he's going to head straight up to Baron, just go ahead and do his objectives. So this Fu bonus here, where Fu only really has access to Virus, doesn't have access to Nuke yet, is going to be a little bit less than it might be for someone finding an early Fu over their opponent. So I'm really, really, really happy to see that in a way, because I didn't want this race to turn into, well, you got Fu early. So really important to note that Vitasia will probably be right behind on that character check.
And also now having a Kane with White Spear is making that damage roll go a lot higher. You also have Berserk, so you do have plenty of ways to really catch up with a lot more damage much faster. So we'll see how that changes through the fights that we've already seen Xyrak go through as Vitasia starts to roll through these as well.
Absolutely. A good place to see that is probably going to be, though, on that Rubicant fight that Xyrak, I believe, basically one-shot, because I believe that his Kane has a Blizzard Spear on at the moment, and that was very, very fortunate for that exact boss. So it might be a case where Vitasia just accidentally has the not as good weapon in that case. Was that Nuke at that point in time? Yep, that was Nuke on Fu. That is very exciting.
Yeah, I think Xyrak and Vitasia, when that point comes as well, are both going to be very happy to see that, especially this early on, because you are thinking again of those Fate March bosses where you're going to need some damage. So to have at least a Nuke spell not towards the very end of Fu's life cycle, is it does make you breathe a little bit of a sigh of relief.
To be entirely honest, I would be really, really tempted to go do those Fey March bosses right now. I think you can almost certainly get through that Golbez fight with what we have available on both sides. I know you can get through that D-Mist fight. As long as Fu has Blink, it should be really, really safe. And even if not, Rosa has Blink on Vitasia's side. I'm not sure she has it yet on Xyrak's side, so that might be a little bit of a thing that gives you a bit of pause there. But I think we can deal with those Fey March bosses. Whoever does those first might get a pretty big advantage here.
Yeah, we're definitely at a point where your options are honestly pretty limited. I mean, both of our runners have not touched ordeals. I think that's the only like open, not moon-related dungeon that they have left to do. So at this point, you're either doing ordeals, you're doing your Fey March checks, or you're doing the moon. So, you know, you're probably right in that Fey March might actually be something to be considered, especially having a Fu with Noob now.
Yeah, the only other option they might consider is doing Keyless Tower, and with that super cannon as an objective, I don't think that either runner's going to have a particular eagerness to go up that tower twice, so probably won't see that here.
Yeah, I mean, there's always the chance that it might be holding said tower key, but, you know, what are the odds of that? Although it looks like Xyrak might be testing those odds.
I am usually wrong about a lot of things over the course of a race. This is just one of them. Xyrak gonna go ahead and head up to the top of this tower, so might as well see what's up there again. If this is a tower key, that's another objective. Even if this is just like the Sand Ruby or something like that, or the Pink Tail, which would be the real big prize at this point in time, this could be something that tilts it in his favor in the end.
Yeah, I mean, right now, Vitasia's still working and catching up to all the steps Xyrak's been taking, so if Xyrak is able to find that Pink Tail, that can really accelerate the, not necessarily the lead that Xyrak has, but in the sense of just Vitasia's doing a lot of following at this point, so there's not a lot of deviation at this juncture. If Xyrak is correct in something very useful, whether it's Tower Key, whether it's Pink Tail, whether it's even Sand Ruby, if it's something you check and at least get a little bit of a head on, like that might actually create a gap that we don't even see until much later. It just might be one of those things that pays off, you know, 20, 30 minutes down the road as we get further down the seed.
Yeah, and again, it's one of those things that could just be a calculated risk as well. You have that super cannon as an objective. Chances are your opponent's probably not going to want to try and do Keyless Tower unless they have to. Or Xyrak could just be thinking, you know what, this Keyless Tower is the only real good check I have available. That Mount Ordeal's not particularly appealing. It's 3 bosses for 1 key item. It's never going to be as quick necessarily as the time you're spending on this Keyless Tower, so might as well go for it. And is rewarded with a very easy fight here in this officer-soldiers fight.
So yeah, even if it's not worthwhile, like it's not going to take you very long to get through it to find out what that is going to lead to. So at the very least, if it leads to nothing, you're not wasting nearly as much time as if it was a certain other amount of fights. Like if Mom Bomb was here, oh boy.
Oh yeah, no, that would be misery. This spot kind of renowned for its very, very high HP, but not necessarily a lot of other stats to back it up. So it tends to just turn into a fight of how quickly can you get damage out, more than how can you get through the potential danger this fight is going to pose. And so Mom Bomb being here with that extra HP, with that penchant for exploding, which you just can't deal with in any real way other than just have more HP, very bad to find here.
Yep. You were mentioning earlier about the Rubicon fight with Xyrak. Vitasia actually had a Ice Brand, so that also created the same solution there, and now Vitasia with that Fu in hand as well. Also, Xyrak in the midst of that fight tried to get a life glitch off on that officer. Didn't get the timing completely right, so it didn't quite work out the way that he was hoping for, but regardless, the fight is over. Now we get to see if it was a good gamble or not.
That does get Rosa to Cure 3, does get Virus on Rydia should he want to use that to conserve MP anywhere else while he's going through here. I don't think that's necessarily a problem right now, but you never know. Most importantly, getting exit on Fu for any particular, exitable checks that still remain. So if Xyrak goes to the moon shortly after here, he can just exit out of cave value, can just exit out of wherever he goes, so might be a bit more tempted in that regard.
Yeah, and it seems like the levels might be the only thing keeping him from resetting, because getting a Legend Sword, while it is a key item, really isn't something that you're hoping to find there. It really doesn't give you much utility at this point.
Yeah, I don't think, unless we find a Cecil really, really soon and then find no weapons for him, I don't think there's a world in which you're planning on turning that Legend Sword in. One thing worth noting here, a little bit of divergence, I don't believe Xyrak checked this Baron basement fight that Vitasia is going to check right now, so this could be particularly crucial here.
And it could be very interesting too if it's a freebie. If you find a King Queen Evelyn here, that's an interesting pickup.
Yeah, with how many hourglasses we have, any non-boss bit enemy is going to be a freebie. That's a sparkle. That is not free. That's a pale dim. You can probably take this. It might just be a little bit annoying to get through.
And I don't think Vitasia's Fu has nuke, so it is going to be a little slower.
Definitely, but it is lucky that this is, not the most threatening of sparkles. It's not Wyvern, it's not Ogopogo, it's not even, D-Lunars in a bad location. It's just Pale Dim. He's just going to slow you down and try and punch you in the face, and really, this should be fine.
Yeah, it's not too rough. And now we're at a point where each of our runners has taken a bit of a gamble in comparison, so we'll see if Vitasia's Divergence actually pays off, or it's just going to be another grind much like Xyrak's was. So it'll be very interesting to see how this turns out.
I'm a little bit concerned about how it's going on Vitasia's side right now because this Pale Dim is hitting quite hard. Probably wants to get a few blinks up to try and mitigate some of this damage. Just needs to get everyone alive at this point. Going to try and throw an illusion with Kayn, not quite get it. Gonna take a reset here.
And now the question becomes, do you keep going or do you move away? And it looks like Vitasia's like, I'll do this later. I can probably do this, but since I don't have to, let's not waste too much time on it.
Yeah, that's perfectly fair. You never want to waste any time if you can just come back to it later, basically for free, and that spot's going to be free later. It's just not free right now. So Vitasia's going to go through this dwarf castle, and honestly, once he gets through this dwarf castle, gets nuke on his Fu, he should be fine if he would want to go back up, but I don't think he's going to go back up anytime soon.
Yeah, probably will take another check at some other things. He also has the Sirens, so if you really felt like doing the Fey March, you literally have access to those that yellow dragon right now, so that would be something you could also do. Xyrak in a similar boat, also buying those Sirens from the shop, so also going to check that character, find the Yong, be probably a little disappointed too, and then we'll see if there's any divergence on that front.
I don't think Xyrak's going to take that Yong. I think that Xyrak has a lot more investment in his Rydia than Vitasia did at that point in time. And I think really just with that Leviathan, you don't want to hand up that Rydia at this point.
And I think we're deep enough in the sea too that there are very few characters that you're going to get a base level that you're going to say, okay, I need to swap you out now. Now I think you're at a point that, okay, I'm basically looking for Edge or Cecil at this point. That's the only real replacement. Unless you find like a dupe Fu, which would be incredible, but very unlikely.
Yeah, it's one of those things where if you're going to do a late replacement, you want a Berserker who's not going to need all those levels, and Young is unique in that he is the Berserker that needs all those levels. So yeah, just going to say goodbye, and Xyrak looks to be diving the moon.
Yeah, again, it's 5 checks, and it is going to get you a lot of experience. Now, you don't have the 10 key items yet to make it real good on experience, but you're probably doing the math now, being like, well, I don't really like those Fey March checks. I've already gambled the Keyless Tower, and that didn't give me anything. I don't know if Xyrak's thought about ordeals or is maybe just avoiding it because it is a lengthy place to go, and you haven't found a Cecil yet, so there's no real incentive at this point. But otherwise, like, you don't have a lot of other options left, so you're kind of stuck because a lot of the dungeons that are gated might just be hiding behind these moon spots, so it's kind of a give or take. You may just have to come here to open things up to get to the things that you need.
Absolutely, and there's also that sort of sunk cost that's not really... It's not really a fallacy in this particular setting, where if you have fated ordeals this long and your opponent did ordeals, then you probably aren't catching them at this point in time if it's something crucial. So you might as well just keep fading it, leave it out, go to other places that you know you can get through, and just really commit to that play. Obviously, Vitasia has not done ordeals either, so we don't know what's up there, and both of them might just be doing the same sort of thing, but there's definitely a good school of thought there that says, if I've faded this spot this long, I'm not going back, because at that point in time, I'm likely following in someone else's footsteps, and I'm likely not going to catch them.
It really, like we said before, it's just really gambling. Like, you're sitting there thinking, well, if I do this, what if that person's done it? Now I'm just playing catch up. If it was crucial, now I know I'm really behind. There's always that part of my brain when I run that I just keep thinking, like, okay, I know I faded this for X long. What if my opponent's done the same thing? Like, you ask a million questions in your head when you're doing this stuff. So there almost never seems to be a correct answer. You just don't know that until you finish the run, or you see that your opponent's finished before you.
Yeah, and I think in these flags in particular that we have for both groups and brackets, but definitely more pronounced in groups, any approach is going to work eventually. And it's not a thing where, one approach is strictly better than the other. It really just depends on the seed, so you might as well just go with what you're comfortable with at this point in time.
And I mean, if you're going to go with what you're comfortable with, well, then ordeals always gets faded, because that's just the thing to do. It's like how I'm very surprised that Fabul didn't get faded much further in. But then again, there wasn't too much else to work with, so I guess it wasn't that surprising.
I've not always, but recently sort of come around to the idea that if you're going to be flying past Fabul anyways, don't commit to single dipping Fabul. Commit to trying to single dip Self Cave instead. Because if you get a pan from the king, that's actually going to save you more time than fading that Fabul, and I think that sort of has become a little bit of the wisdom here, that you don't necessarily need to fade Fabul as heavily as you do on other flag sets, because it's probably going to be required, and chances are you're going to, be going there eventually. You might as well just get it done and out of the way. Both of our runners doing a little bit of a grind here. Xyrak with the King Ryus, Vitasia with the eggs. I think Vitasia is going to go down and do these Fey March bosses now.
Yeah, and like you said, both are probably doable at this point, having nuke on your Fu. It's just a matter of, okay, I better sit down and get ready for 10 to 15 minutes of just irritation. So, you're hoping that it's worth it. Now, I mean, they are objectives you have to do. You're also really hoping that you find a pink tail would probably be the best case scenario. I guess Tower Key would be nice too, because it's a really easy objective to finish. So, really, as long as you're finding something else to chain it with, that would be great. If it really is just finishing these two fights, I mean, you take it, but you're also a little sad, because after all that time you spent, you're hoping that you got something to show for it.
Yeah, I mean, you're going to have to do these two eventually. It's just you want to do them later. Because, well, I don't know. It's kind of weird, because how much are you going to speed up that Golbez, realistically? Not a lot. How much are you going to speed up that demist? Some, maybe you do one less mist cycle, but not a ton. That spot doesn't have a lot of HP. I think it's kind of hard to say whether or not this is, the best time to do it or not, because you might as well do objectives if you got nothing left on the table, It's kind of, it's a difficult decision.
Yeah, I mean, Golbez is going to take you some time. It's almost 54,000, so you're going to have some work to do with him. Granted, the spells that he bounces back will help a little bit, although I don't know if I've ever faced Golbez in that spot, so I don't know what the damage bounce back will be.
I'm trying to think of how much spell power Leviathan has. I want to say that it can be very spicy, but I think also we have a Dragoon armor, which is going to help against everything except those viruses, depending on who Vitasia has it on, so that could be quite helpful as well.
Yeah, and choosing to start with that Golbez, so we'll see how that fight goes. The more important thing is you're just hoping, I assume with this being the strategy, that you're just hoping Fu lives through this shadow run, because Fu is probably going to be your best source of making this fight go as fast as possible.
I'm almost tempted to reset until I get one where Fu stands up and stays up. And we're about to see this real fascinating situation here. We have dueling bosses, the Fey March bosses over on Vitasia's side, the Moon bosses, starting with this Calcabrina here in this ribbon room over on Xyrak's side. make sure you give both of these runners a follow, because as you can see, they have very different and very interesting ways of playing this game, and neither one is really necessarily looking better than the other at this point. It's a very, very close race still.
It's really going to come down to who just made the right call, and sometimes that's all these seeds are. It's just, did you guess right, or did you guess a little bit off and just took that little extra time too long? It's just, you never know.
Yeah. Very lucky that this Calcabrina is the first one, but also unlucky. I believe you end up getting less experience from this particular ribbon room fight just from it being Calcabrina. It's still a very big chunk, but it's a free one that's gonna make a little bit less benefit. Still threw it very easily. Gets a crystal ring and Artemis arrows, both of which are good, but not necessarily what you're hoping for here.
Yeah, you take 2 checks in the ribbon room and you come out with no key items. It's a little sad. I mean, they're not bad items, but man, you're sitting there hoping that you had 2 cracks that you would have at least gotten some sort of a key item at that point.
Yeah, the extra agility for that Rydia in this case on Xyrak's side gonna come in very handy, but not really gonna make great use of those Artemis arrows at the moment. Vitasia is having some trouble with this Golbez fight right now, having trouble keeping everyone up, but looking like it's starting to stabilize here a bit.
Yeah, Golbez has not been cooperative for a little while here, but sometimes sometimes you gotta troll Golbez. Like, he does laugh at the beginning of a fight for a reason. He knows what he's gonna do.
And what he's gonna do is wait for you to pick that sit up with a life potion and then just lit 3 him back down for more than his max health anyways. And gonna take the Fu out again, so still gonna be a little bit rough on this recovery right now, but should be able to get it back up just with enough time. Meanwhile, Xyrak finding a Dark Elf here at this Plague Altar. That's another pretty good boss to find.
Yeah, you're gonna get some decent damage off now. No White Spear on that Cane to make it go really fast, but you still have Nuke. That solves most of your problems.
You know, Fu is a solution to any problem as long as you get him the right spells, aside from maybe the Zeromus fight, just because he just tends to not have the HP for those high rolls. Although, you know what? You get the nerfs perfect. You're good. So this shouldn't really pose too much of an issue, just really needs to get through the HP here, and this Dark Elf is doing a lot of cycles right now. That's what's worrying me. How much time are you losing to just how long he's spending casting?
And thankfully, Vitasia's ahead and finally got that Fu up to get 1 nuke, only for the battle to be over now. I'm sure Vitasia's not cursing a little bit under his breath after the way that fight went. But it's done, and if it ends up being something really good, well, then you're okay with that.
This is one of the most important moments. It is a pan. That's 2 more potential key items once you go down to the Sylph Cave. Bonk Yang, that's a check. Sheila 2, that's a check. Just need to get to this D-Mist for the other check here. That is actually one of the best things that's not one of our objectives that you could have found here.
Yeah, because while it may be Magic Beans, it's Magic Beans times 2, so it's a lot more promise than 1 Magic Bean was going into that fight.
Absolutely.
So now you're sitting there thinking like, okay, I didn't get anything now, but it could be Pinktail and Sand Ruby, for example. Maybe Sand Ruby's hiding Cecil. Oh boy, I have a Light Sword already. I can go to Ordeals now, get that thing. Who knows, maybe even Tower Keys happens to be at Ordeals. Oh, I'm on Easy Street now. So there's a lot of things in that pan that just makes you go, okay, this could really work out well if I check this now. But probably we'll do that D-Mist fight first. Since you're already here, you might as well.
Yeah, it could also be like a Tower Key and a Sand Ruby, and then you do the Tower and you get the Pinktail on the way out. You're like, uh-oh. If I was slower getting through these Feymarch bosses, I am very, very on the clock right now, because this just turned into about as close to a jet seed as these particular objectives could have led us to. So this is a very important moment here. Also, this D-Mist. Getting a package, meanwhile, over on Xyrak's side for that White Spear Altar. So
far, the chances of Vitasia possibly making the better call here, doing Feymarch first, might be happening, because so far that's 2, I think, Xyrak's only done 2 checks so far on the LST that have come up with nothing, essentially. Unless that package is successful, but even then, are you going to sit through that cutscene at this point?
At this point, no. I don't think you do. I don't know. Maybe
I think if you found a crystal sword, maybe?
If you find a crystal sword, or if you find that adamant rock and have an Excalibur for him, then maybe you do, because it won't take long to get him to levels where he's going to be comfortable in the Z fight, and maybe is a bit more useful than that Rydia once we get there, but it's not going to be the big, wow, I got a Cecil, I'm going to cruise through the rest of the seed thing, because we're kind of at the point on Xyrak's side where we're already cruising. And on Vitasia's side, he's just taking a couple of difficult spots right now, but he's pretty much in that same spot too.
Yeah, both cases were like, okay, Xyrak thinking, I'm just going to do this mass amount of checks, get my levels, because I'm going to need them for, especially for Giant. I probably will find something here. The odds just seem to be in my favor on that. Even if it doesn't lead to anything specifically objective-based, it might lead to another dungeon that's chained to it, so you're probably leaning in a direction that's something useful. Whereas Vitasia's thinking, if I just get these objectives done now, they're out of the way, and I might have found some stuff along the way that might help me. Either decision honestly makes a lot of sense. It's just a matter of which one actually is the correct one in the end. And we're going to be pretty close to seeing that as Xyrak gets closer to finishing most of these LST bosses, and Vitasia has nearly done the Fame Arch.
Yeah, definitely. Xyrak has found elements here at this Masamune altar, and for those of you who are wondering what's going on Xyrak's side, if you've never seen this strategy before, welcome to Reflect strategy. So if you reflect a spell back onto a monster, you skip its counter script. It does not perform any of its usual counterattacks. And part of the way that this Elements boss is programmed is that once you get this Mylon Z portion down to a specific health value that I believe varies based on the spot, so I don't know what it is here off the top of my head, he basically counterattacks and turns into Rubicon. So by doing this, you're effectively halving the HP that it has, because you're just going to knock it over, it won't counter. You won't see any of those later phases. You only have to deal with this. Although this phase is giving a bit of trouble. Meanwhile, Vitasia has only found a crystal ring that he missed.
So now it's really down to that pan. I mean, again, you still need to do these two objectives, so it's not like a loss at this point. Although, again, if this pan comes through with anything, especially a pink tail, if getting Adamant armor is going to make a lot of fights even easier. If you want to talk about breezing.
Oh, Xyrak just had the wall fall off on Kane, unfortunately hitting for 4.8k with that Fire 3. Gonna put another Star Veil onto Rosa. Still should be fine, should get through it, I think, with this hit, but that was a little bit of an unfortunate delay in his case.
Yeah, it was just a lot of bullying happening so far in this seed, with the Golbez fight earlier and now Elements being a little uncooperative. Ooh, and a Bahamut summon on Vitasia's side, so far, again, even though it's not necessarily a bad thing, just not paying dividends. And again, that's 3 checks of the LST also not paying dividends. Not that the Zeus Gauntlet isn't bad, but it's certainly not what you're looking for.
All right, the next big question for me on Vitasia's side, you just got through those 2 Fame Arch bosses. You are getting through Sheila 2. Obviously, what you do from here is going to be dependent on what she gives you. Do you go back to Baron and do that Odin spot before you go up to the moon? I think that you probably should in this case, but whether or not you do is going to matter quite a bit.
Yeah, and as we keep looking further and further into this, if these still don't... Oh, there's your Sand Ruby, so at least the pan paid off. But now you start looking at Xyrak's side, and you start looking at what's left on Vitasia's side. We were joking earlier about, like, you're just going to keep fading ordeals. The longer this takes, the more and more likely that ordeals becomes to have any sort of value.
I'd be very tempted to do ordeals at this point, on the whole, because I think that there's a sort of temptation when you get an hour in and you had an early darkness crystal to think, if I didn't go to the moon and my opponent did, I've already lost. I might as well try and hope that he left something behind down here on the planet. And now, so that could really play in here.
Now, as we're heading into Kaipo here, before Vitasia finishes a couple item checks here, what would you hope to find in the Sand Ruby location right now?
Exactly as Cecil, I'm not sure you necessarily even take an edge. Maybe you take an edge. Maybe you get rid of Sid or Yang in this case, but...
Assuming he hasn't sold it, you do have one of his swords.
Yeah, that's a pretty solid case there.
In the meantime, I believe Crystal Sword location is where we're seeing the Baron guards, so that'll be check 4 or 5, I believe, in the LST. I don't think Xyrak did the Murasame altar.
Did not. Did the traditional bottom up where you run straight down to the bottom, do that ribbon room, do that white spear altar, do all 3 down there, and then head back up. So we'll end up seeing that after this. This moon has been quite kind so far, actually. Really not finding any particularly difficult bosses, given the way you can sort of cheese your way around that element spot, even though it's given him a little bit of trouble just due to where he was in terms of power, is more than, a giant problem. So really paying off here. Finding an Avenger, that's a pretty good pickup for that Kayn, but it's still not progress.
Yeah, so far, I don't even think we've seen a key item out of... No, we have not seen a key item out of the... Oh, no, the package. I misspoke there. No, so we're 1 for 4 in terms of key items, but we're 0 for 4 in anything that you actually want to see. So this LST is getting real interesting. You have to finish it now, but you're probably in Xyrak's position looking at this being like, man, are you telling me 4 chances at this and I haven't found a squat? Like, you got to be getting a little bit flustered at this point.
It's also really annoying on Xyrak's side because all this moon XP is now landing before he has 10 key items. And it won't be a huge problem because he still has to go through the giant. Those are still 2 very, very big XP spots that he almost certainly will have 10 key items for at this point, because I gotta imagine you're not going there until you have it. But only being at 8 going into this Murasame altar, not what you want here.
Well, it looks like Vitasia is also taking the keyless tower gamble, which we know already is not going to pay off unless you really want an Excalibur down the line, or at least half of one at this point.
Yeah, maybe there's a world where you do, but I think that world is getting more and more distant, more and more far away as we get deeper and deeper into the seed. It's becoming harder and harder to justify spending a lot of extra time on that Cecil. And so I gotta think that you're very not excited by this Legend Sword. If he saved before then, I would be tempted to just reset out.
Yeah, that was the thinking too. Because he didn't save at the top, my assumption would be if it's not anything he likes, he's just going to jet, because you're not getting a lot of experience out of this fight either, so it's not exactly going to give you a lot. So I would fully expect to see a reset after this fight.
Yeah, and this is going to be one of those good examples of, you go to a boss spot later, you can potentially get through it a lot faster. Xyrak did not take a ton of time at the top of tower, but he had a bit more setup, a few more turns, because he weaked the back officer and then hit the back officer, then had to knock down the other 3. Vitasia just drops a coffin, drops a quake, that's over. Looks like he might be keeping that Legend Sword, though.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to it, but I'm also kind of surprised because, again, you're thinking, I don't have a Cecil, and the longer we go too, the more and more likely that Cecil might even just be a giant where you're just never going to use him. So, you wonder. Oh no, Vitasia actually did opt to end up resetting. So,
yeah, chat pointing out that it is another key item, would bring him up to 9 at this point in time, but I don't know. I think it's kind of hard to justify keeping at this point when you still know that you're going to get more later. So just going to reset out and not bother keeping that time. And it looks like Vitasia might be going for the moon, which, well, it's kind of hard to say, but this seems like it might not end up being the right play here, just based off of what we know off of this seed so far.
We're about to know what the 5th one is, because all that's left is K value at this point, so we'll see. And, well, at least we know one objective's here now. And it looks like Vitasia's going to check the other location that we have left to find out. So we're going to know pretty quickly how useful the rest of this moon is.
That is complicated, because what do you do if you get that tower key? Do you go over to K value, which I feel, again, like you should, and it looks like Xyrak is going to? Or are you tempted to leave, and Xyrak is just going to go ahead and go for it here?
The more interesting thing will be Vitasia's case, because if Vitasia finds, in crazy scenario, Vitasia could conceivably find Pinktail here, and if he makes the call to start top up, could get out of here really quickly. But if, let's say, there's nothing here but goes to Murasame and finds the tower key, do you suddenly go, I only need the pink tail, should I just get my objectives done first and then think about this stuff later?
No, I think you got to commit to the moon if you're going to the moon. It's one of those things where if you don't commit to the moon when you're already here and you have to come back later, you're wasting an extra 50 seconds. And if you got to do giant, you probably want to do it on the way down from the moon. So you might as well just bundle them all together instead of trying to do it on two different sides. Finding that Val at cave value, good old cave Val value, is not the best place for our runners tonight, I think.
No, seems like location-wise, the seed has been trying to give some pretty ugly stuff, and we've still yet to see the giants, so a lot of potential to still see some fun afterwards. But yeah, the seed has been not particularly the nicest in some locations, although the rest of the moon, as we've seen, is not too bad. So depending on what Vitasia does here in terms of what direction, either way, it's going to be, at this point, relatively simple. It's just a matter of it doesn't go that much faster because of the current setup that Vitasia's running.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know right now. This is such a very dynamic race that we have going on that it's kind of hard to say who's making the right decision for the seed. I think they kind of both are. And that's kind of a very awkward position. The question is going to end up being, what is behind this Val at cave value? And if it is not Pinktail, then who goes back to that Baron spot first, and who goes to Mount Ordeals first?
Well, and that's going to be the thing too. Like now, if Val ends up even having nothing, literally you're either getting a massive chain through Super Cannon, or you're getting a massive chain through Ordeals potentially. So we're getting down to the wire here with just where everything is going to start leading. And it's going to be also interesting, too, because Vitasia is starting top down, so getting that tower key now, again, do you just full clear here? But it's also, you're committing now to potentially 5 checks if there's nothing here, and all you're looking for right now is 1 item. So it's really going to be an interesting thing. I kind of agree with you that I figure you're already starting on the moon, you might as well commit, but we'll see what happens here once Vitasia sees the objective in front of him.
It's one of those things where I think you kind of got to keep going because you've already spent so long delaying coming to the moon. Going back at this point is not going to feel good. There is that pink tail from that Val. That is not the best thing for Vitasia right now.
Also really interesting that a vast majority of the game is no longer going to be played now. That will, unless I don't know if there's really a chain Xyrak could take at this point. That could be way off. Because where did the Sand Ruby come? Sand Ruby came from the pants. So if Xyrak just does the objectives in front of him, we may not see anything else in this game. Because there's no reason apart from Super Cannon to do anything else now.
Yeah, I think at this point in time, when you're sitting there with only 1 key item remaining, you've got those 2 checks. I think what you do if you're in Xyrak's shoes is when you're on your way back down, do the giant. Just do the giant right now. I think that's why we're seeing this little bit of a King Ryu grind on his side. Do it. That way you don't have to... You can just ditch the whale, not do anything else. Head straight down to the Fey March, and that will eventually lead him to that point. So this is kind of Vitasia on the clock a little bit to try and make sure that he gets that little bit of an advantage that he has. Because I think if Vitasia makes the exactly right steps, even if he goes through the entirety of the moon, he might still be fairly even, if not a little bit ahead. We'll see.
It's going to be very interesting because now you start getting into the question of, is there anything that can throw people off here? In Xyrak's case, if he just sticks to objectives, the answer is no. However, in Vitasia's case, in the crazy scenario that he sees that tower key and immediately goes down, tower key is now very likely to give you anything else that might pull you somewhere. So I don't think that you're going to see someone suddenly get pulled off on another tangent, but that could be the deciding factor here if one of these 2 runners gets pulled in any direction, because at this point, we pretty much see what Go Mode looks like in front of us, just neither of them are quite there yet.
Definitely Xyrak sort of pacing back and forth, and he is going to go to the giant, so we'll see who those two bosses are. But here's another thing that's worth noting too. Xyrak just got that pink tail. That pink tail is an Adamant armor. Adamant armor blocks status effects. Part of why Golbez is annoying to get through is because of his status effects. It'll also block the Demolish off the Shadow Dragon. How much is having that Adamant armor going to speed up that fight on Xyrak's side?
And also, it does mean that, assuming you're protecting Fu, you know that Fu is guaranteed now to go through, so now you don't have to worry about wiping either.
I think if I was Xyrak, I'd be tempted to put the Adamant armor elsewhere and maybe try and find maybe hope you land a cursed ring somewhere. I don't think, actually, you can't really go hunting for a cursed ring at this point, so I don't really know what Xyrak's anchoring situation is going to be, but I think he might be tempted to just leave it off the Fu, unless he's planning on just getting rid of Fu for an actual anchor when going to the Z fight.
Yeah, at this point now, especially with the potential of not seeing either of our runners do anything else beyond what is now in front of us, because we have every piece of information we need now, it's going to be interesting to see how their final parties are set, because you're not going to, like, I don't think you're going to go find an anchor at this point, unless you somehow open a chest that finds a curse ring, but who's opening chests at this point? So it's going to be really interesting to see where this goes towards the end here.
Yeah, I think it really, at this point, comes down to how quickly does Vitasia get through these moon bosses, and most importantly, does he go back to Cave Value? Because there is a chance that he fades that spot, in which case that is pretty much going to be game for him, unfortunately.
Yep.
But Xyrak finding CPU here at the element spot. This is not the most fun fight you can find here with all this extra HP.
I mean, it's free. It's not the best free, but it's free.
It's free, asterisk.
Well, I think in this case, in this spot, it might be more than one asterisk.
It's free as long as you can get through the 65,000 HP that this actual CPU has, but it looks like he's going to try and reflect float and hope that it lands on the attacker at this point in time, which in this case means that he can just cast Quake over and over again. It lands on Defender. That is not a great prize.
Uh-oh, that's not helping at all, is it?
Well, you get two chances at it. You knock down the Defender, you cast Float again, and you hope it lands on attacker from there. But that's kind of your only way around it. You got to win one of those two rolls if you're going to do the Float strats.
Well, in the meantime, Vitasia continues the run down, finishing that Crystal Sword fight, so now we'll be getting that Avenger and working his way down to White Spear and Ribbon Room. So the progress continues here, and another float, I believe, just landed on the Defender again.
Yeah, as long as we can knock over that Defender, we will eventually have that be a coin flip instead of it being a 1 in 3 shot, so much better chance at that point. But I think if you're relying 100% on this float, you're probably not going to be in for the best fight right now.
Yeah, and also the feeling of throwing a 6,000 damage nuke and it still isn't finishing the Defender yet, that's also making you go, oh god, I hate this spot.
And that float lands on CPU, and he's just going to reset and try again. This is a very big potential equalizer. I want to say that this element spot is the highest HP spot in the game outside of Zeromus, so that is that's a bad time.
Yeah, you know, it's only 65,000, and each of the small guys are getting about 8,700. So you know, it's not the boss you want to see here. It's already bad enough that it can be an annoyingly long fight, but you know, it's the most annoyingly long fight you can possibly have with it. So that's great. We were talking earlier about, you know, how the seed has not been too generous with the bosses. I'd say it hasn't been nearly as mean in terms of difficulty, although that Val is pretty mean. This has just been a matter of like throwing a lot of irritatingly long fights in this seed.
Yeah, it's kind of the classic question of Free Enterprise. Would you rather have the very, very difficult fights, like the Baigan that's just punching constantly and knocking everyone over, and you have to really, really try hard to get around it? Or would you rather have these giant walls like King Golbez, Queen Demist, and CPU at Elements? And I think this is making a very good argument that you'd rather have the difficult ones. But that float has landed on CPUs or on attackers, so this is a very, very good thing. We're good to get underway here, although this fight's still going to take quite a while.
Yeah, you're still looking at. We'll definitely see. Oh god, we're talking like at least 5 or 6 quakes potentially. Although I think Rydia has it as well, so that's not nearly as bad. So it is a little helpful in that aspect.
Yeah, it's one of those situations where this is a very good play, but it relies on RNG in order to get that set up, and unfortunately that RNG just was not in Xyrak's favor on the first try here. But you know what? That's what reset's for. That's why there's a save point, so you can try again, and try again we have, and he should be through with relative ease at this point. It's just going to take a little while.
And you also can make the argument too that it might actually be okay that Xyrak reset off one of them, because you actually still keep a little bit of time maybe in comparison to Vitasia's party, because Vitasia will only have one spellcaster that could potentially do that strategy, so now Vitasia's more just going to be having to swing for a bunch of the fight. So maybe even with the one reset, Xyrak still makes up a little bit of time by being able to have 2 quakes going simultaneously.
It's interesting because we do know that Edge is back row glitch, did have a full moon to put on him in this case, so he'll be doing full damage. I don't think we've been able to back row the Kane, so that's unfortunate, and I don't believe you can back row the Yang, so that's a bit of a bad time. So we will at least have one of those 3 attackers doing full damage here, so that will take a little bit of the sting off.
So Vitasia one more fight in the LST away. I can't remember what was down at the Masamune, whether it was the boss or the item. I know it wasn't anything particular. I think no, I don't remember at all.
That was the Elements for a Zeus Gauntlet fight.
Yes. So once again, we're going to be very quickly getting to that point where we see if Vitasia fades that Val fight or not now. So we're getting real close to seeing if that that absolutely necessary fight is going to suddenly be put on the wayside, which would be a catastrophic mistake. Although Vitasia obviously doesn't know that.
One thing worth noting too over here on this fight for Xyrak, forced to use the elixir on Fu in order to get him to continue casting nukes because he ran out of MP. That is how tanky this spot is right now.
Yeah, that 65,000 is no joke.
Oh, another big difference here over on Vitasia's side. We will not be able to do that reflect strategy. You can, but it will be slow. So he's just going to be going the standard way, pop that Avenger onto Kane, start nuking, and hope we get through, which is going to be very spicy because Glare hurts, as does everything else Rubicon can do here.
Yeah, you're just going with the old tried and true, okay, just punch over and over again and make the problem go away and hoping nothing bad happens in the meantime, which we'll see how the damage rolls decide to go, because if you see that turtle, you're breathing a heavy sigh of relief then.
It's a question of what level of whelming is your power. Not enough to get through there, does take a wipe, gonna be forced to go through that fight again at this point. But Xyrak's through the CPU.
Yeah, just not quite what you want to see. And we start wondering too, and again with not having the 10 key items, and at this point we may not see 10 key items at the entirety of this game, so there may be no double XP in this entire run potentially.
Xyrak is at 10. He does have the Hook Darkness Crystal package. Yeah, the spoon was getting me earlier too. I didn't notice it lit up and I was counting 9, but does have that 10 at this point, so we'll be getting that full experience at this point.
It's hard to say, but it's starting to feel like, especially with the higher levels going into those Fame March bosses, Xyrak might be starting to pull ahead again. But it's really hard to tell at this point.
This race has been fascinating. I have not seen this on one of the races I've been on commentary for, a race where about half an hour in, our runners went 2 different paths. they have not met back up since, aside from that little tiny bit of a very distant moon high five that you can't even count as a high five. If you're on opposite ends of a planet, it doesn't count as a high five. But, you know, it's really difficult to say at this point. I think you're right, though, that Xyrak might have a little bit of an advantage right now.
Yeah, and also having the adamant armor potentially going into those Fate March fights will definitely improve things too, so... At least on Vitasia's side, getting out of the Rubicon part of that fight, so now you don't have to think about the really extreme spells here, so should be able to get through this Elements fight now.
Yeah, but we are also seeing something that Vitasia has in store for him, eventually finding the cousin of the, like, tentacles in the Figaro Castle engine from 6, the Ogopogo in the CPU here on the Giant in Final Fantasy IV. Not the best, not the worst. Should be fine to get through this at this point, but that's one of those, oh, why are you making this happen sort of bosses to see here.
Yeah. So now with Vitasia done the LST, so we just, like you said earlier, we asked the question, does he continue on and just full clear the moon with that Val fight? Or the problem with having that tower key is, like I said earlier, it's something you have to do, and if you make that check and it leads to something else, do you suddenly chase that? In which case, you're going in a direction you do not want to go.
We gotta hope that he goes to cave value from here. It looks like he was tempted to go, but yep, going to that console means that he's gonna go back and take care of that Val. We're gonna see Dueling Giants. Depending on how quickly Vitasia can get through those 2 giant bosses, this might actually, maybe he is ahead at this point.
Yeah,
because,
it's so hard to tell because you don't know how the other 2 fights are going to go. There is still the traversing thing with the Fey March as well, so there is some walking to do as well. So timing this is not as easy as it looks. We're really just guessing at this point. It might be literally dead center in the middle between these 2, and we don't know, and one might be 5 minutes ahead right now. It's just so hard to call, but that's what makes this race exciting right now, and the stakes are so high too, so it's making this a heck of a run as we get further and further to the end here.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the theme of the tournament, you know? Going in, you know, you see the sort of big names from previous tournaments, and you're like, all right, I think I've figured out who's going to get out of the... Nope. You would be wrong. Every single person in every one of these groups has been a threat from the start. Even though Vitasia is at this point unable to make it to bracket stage, unfortunately, with that record, he's making a very good case that, you know, on any given other set of matches that he would have had, he would be in those brackets. So very, very good run by him at this point, too.
Yeah, I mean, you get the chance to play spoiler as well, get at least some sort of bragging rights to take to the end of the group stage with you, even though you don't make it to the tiebreakers, or not the tiebreaker, the play-in stage. So, you know, either way, both our runners are putting on a fantastic show right now. This is probably, out of all the races I think I've done, and I haven't done too many yet, but this is feeling like the closest race I've gotten to see so far, and I'm loving every second of this right now.
Absolutely, and so while Vitasia is here in this Val fight, while Xyrak is moving this hovercraft over to go ahead and head down to turn in that pink tail, I want to give a shout out to our behind the scenes team. First of all, Neobari, our restreamer, for not only restreaming, but also rolling a very, very exciting and intense to watch seed. This has been a brilliant match. And also to our tracker, Black Ice, for doing a wonderful job keeping up with this, because I know that sort of when you're tracking, you're kind of hoping that they'll go in the same direction so you can go off of the same thing that they've already done, and going in 2 different directions is no easy feat. So make sure you give both of them a follow, as well as, of course, to my co-commentator today, CS Radical. Thank you very much for being here on this race. It's been a really good one so far.
And I mean, you can tell how different it is because look at our objectives. There's literally the most deviation you can possibly see apart from that Baron Castle clear. Our runners have gone in completely opposite directions, and at some point, this is all going to come back front and center when they all merge, potentially having a Z fight within moments of each other if this times out the way that we think it might. This is going to be very interesting.
Absolutely. Both runners have to get up the tower halfway, get to that super cannon room, come back out. That's going to be about the same time for both of them, no matter what, because this is not a very difficult boss spot. the worst thing it could be is like a sneaky wyvern that manages to get something off, and I don't think that's going to happen in this case. It should be fast enough. There is, on Xyrak's side, how quickly can he get those 2 Feymarch bosses down? How quickly can he get to the bottom of Sylph Cave and come back up so we can get that Sand Ruby from Sheila 2? But on Vitasia's side, it's just a question of, you know, how quickly can I get back down to the planet through the giant, trade away that pink tail, and get to that super cannon room.
Do you consider trading the pink tail first, or do you just go straight to giant at this point?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'll be 100% honest. I think there's a world where going to the pink tail, knowing what we know about those 2 bosses, might be a bit faster. That adamant armor on one of our 3 sort of attackers could be really, really fast for swinging through that. And it looks like he is going to go to that. So with those 2 spots, I think going for that adamant armor is the right call, but I would not have been surprised if he just skipped it.
And it looks like that's exactly what's happening here. Maybe even checking tower first before doing anything else. That's also possible as well.
I think if you're going to be doing the giant, you probably want to do the giant sooner rather than later. Although you might be right, actually, because where Vitasia's sitting, he is in absolute go mode right now. Xyrak is not quite in go mode, although he's effectively in it, because I gotta imagine he's going to go down to those Feymarch bosses, and that'll lead him to it. But he knows that he can just go down, deal with that, get that pink tail, get that tower key, and then be on the whale, and then just fly that to Troya. It looks like he's going to pick up some Bacchus wines first, though.
I was about to say, I'm like, what was at the Evelyn item shop? I was sitting there being like, what else are you doing for Evelyn other than checking items? So what was there? And yeah, Bacchus wines. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, Vitasia needs the Bacchus wines. He has the Yang, the Edge, and the Cane that all need to be able to be berserked, and only one source of berserk in terms of that Fu at this point. Xyrak has a little bit more of a sort of hybrid strats party where he has that Rydia, been doing a great job of showcasing what Rydia can do if you have the setup for her, has that Rosa, and has the 2 attackers, or has the Fu, and then has the Cane, so he doesn't need to go back up for that. He's got Berserk taken care of, no problem.
Well, Xyrak is about to go do those Feymarch fights. Vitasia, since you're down here, you might as well put that pink tail in, so now it's going to be a matter of, can Vitasia do the giant and the super cannon faster than Xyrak can do the Feymarch? Because yeah, you do have to do the Feymarch and check the pans, so it's going to be really interesting to see the optimization between these 2 on who gets what done fast. I still have the feeling that Xyrak might have a less of a journey now, just based on what I'm staring at, but it's still hard to say.
I think with that pink tail turn in, knowing what we know right now about exactly where our runners are, I think for the first time in an hour, I'm pretty sure that I know who's in the lead, and I do think it is Xyrak at this point. But it is not an unimpeachable lead. It is definitely one that you can surpass at any point in time. It's still down to the wire.
It's literally, if, like, let's assume we're correct in Xyrak being in the lead. Let's say it's by a couple of minutes. If Xyrak somehow wipes to a Z fight, like, all of a sudden that changes everything.
I don't know. I feel like Xyrak has the safer Zeromus fight of our 2 runners right now, but I don't think it's by much. I'm finding it hard to think of a situation where he might wipe to it, especially with that adamant armor going on that Rydia. But the question is what's going to be faster? A possible Reflect Strat Zeromus or a full Berserker Zeromus? I think maybe the Reflect Strats by a little bit, just based off of what we have for damage over on Vitasia's side, but not by a lot.
Yeah, I think the key at this point now is just the sheer amount of walking Vitasia still has to do is probably what's holding him back right now. I would say somewhere between 2 and 3 minutes, which is a tough one. So we'll see, but man, this is a bit of a nail biter right now. I mean, we're gonna get a much clearer picture as, you know, we see one of them get right up to Z, but man.
Oh, chat just pointed out something very, very important that we sort of glossed over. The Luca key coming from that tower. What if Xyrak checks that Luca key not knowing where that Sand Ruby is?
That's true. But you would also, you would assume that you check the freebies first, because I mean it's the least amount you can do. Although technically you don't have to fight Seal Cave, so that's interesting. Because at least with Luca Key, all you have to do is just get to the bottom and see. So wow, that would be very interesting.
But the problem is that we only have two potential chains left at this point. One is the Luca Key, one is behind the Baron Basement Throne spot. The chances of that Luca Key giving you a harp or an Earth Crystal is quite high. And because of that, you kind of have to walk that out, because if that Sand Ruby is behind one of those, you lose if you don't walk it out 100%, because you have to go back down the sealed cave at some point. So
yeah,
that is a big question. And the secondary question to me is, maybe you check the pan first, but maybe you do something where you go down, do the bonk on Young, and decide, you know what? If I run down this sealed cave now and see what's down there, I don't have to come back underground at any point in time. I'm done with the underground. I might as well do this now so I can avoid that time waste of running around the map.
And if that logic comes, that might be just enough time to even this race out. Ooh, that is real interesting. And it looks like Vitasia is going to prepare for that giant now. Looks like to be getting prepared for a couple of Siren Grinds to even this out. So, oh boy, this is going to be real interesting after Xyrak gets this Golbez fight done.
Yeah, my big question right now, how many eggs is Vitasia going to do? Getting them down very, very quickly with that Avenger on Kane, just taking him out in one hit. But how many do you need at this point? Because I think I would be very tempted with the levels that I have on Vitasia's side to say, I'm probably good enough to deal with the Giant. I should just go there right away. But there's always something to be said for safety, and this might actually work in the long run, because he doesn't know it yet. Obviously, we know it, but that CPU and that Ogopogo are not the most pleasant things to find.
Yeah, you're going to need as much damage as you can get, so who knows, maybe just those couple of Sirens will help just enough to really make that worth its time, so we'll see.
The clock is ticking 100% on Xyrak's side right now. Does he make the right decisions in routing? And how long does it take him to get there? If he goes straight up that pan, I think he's in the lead going into Zeromus. If he doesn't, it's a lot closer. Maybe if he only checks Sealed Cave, then he's a bit closer than that, but it's hard to say.
Yeah, like doing the math in my head right now, if Xyrak just goes straight for pan and just finishes it, then we're done. Like, we're now just a matter of, okay, if he has no problems with Z, it's over. If he checks Seal Cave, that may actually give Vitasia the room to catch up, maybe even change the amount of time. So it might put Vitasia into Z first. Really hard to say. This is going to be a game of inches here, depending on Xyrak's one decision that he's going to have to make as soon as he gets this pan. And that's really going to decide. It's crazy to think, but this one decision might actually decide everything else in the rest of this game now.
Absolutely. Xyrak already threw the Golbez. You can see the difference at all those levels, all that gear, everything that he's found up on that moon, which really helped set him up a bit more for this, really paying off and getting through that. That pan is in his hands now, and this race is in his hands now. What does he do?
I need a heart rate monitor on this thing right now, because I'm starting to get jacked watching this. This is going to be real interesting.
Vitasia taking a reset there. I believe still has, the Avenger on Kane. Needs to make sure to unequip that before going into the CPU fight here. This CPU is going to take quite a while. Looks like Xyrak is heading down to Sylph Cave now.
So yeah, assuming that we're sticking... if he turns for Luca, then we have at least a little bit of an opening again. But if he just goes straight above to go to Fabul, yeah, it's almost pretty safe to say that unless like a catastrophic failure at Z happens, this is probably game. So yeah, we are moments away from seeing where this game might be headed.
Moments away from seeing where this game might be headed. Moments away from seeing where this tournament is headed. Because again, Xyrak with a victory here would be going into a tiebreaker to see who goes into the play-in match. For those of you who are unfamiliar with our tournament rules, basically this would lead to a three-way tie for second at 3-2. at which point in time we would have a tiebreaker race between all three of them, between Xyrak, Elven Sorrow, and Beauty and Discovery. The top two from that would go on to the play-in match to decide who goes into the bracket from there. So there's a lot to play for right here. This is going to determine basically whether or not Xyrak has a chance to make the bracket stage.
And it looks indeed that Xyrak's making the right call, just getting the freebies done first, and we'll be happy to find that find the Sand Ruby. A massive sigh of relief will be blown from Xyrak's end. Possibly, may not even know where Vitasia's at, but at least knowing that Go mode is just about to be on the way.
Absolutely. You know, both of our runners have played an absolutely brilliant race today. I'm having a hard time coming up with words to describe exactly how this has been going. Vitasia is in this CPU fight. Again, make sure you give both of our runners a follow. They've been putting on the best show I've seen in a while, I'll be honest with you. This is an amazing match, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing the end of it as Xyrak has that Sand Ruby in hand.
This is 100% the first race I've ever had that I've actually like physically felt my heart rate go up. This has been very, very exciting to watch.
Absolutely. And if this is going to set the pace for how the rest of the tournament is going to go from here, I'm going to be on the edge of my seat for the next month and a half. So very much looking forward to that here.
Oh, don't get me started on how much I'm looking forward to the tie, or the not. Well, I guess tiebreakers if there are any. Obviously the play-ins and especially the brackets. I cannot wait.
Absolutely. Xyrak finding this edge here, definitely not going to take that edge, because even if you were going to take, you know, edge, even if you're like tempted to find an anchor, edge is not an anchor in any situation unless he's a fast anchor, so that's not happening today. Has that crystal in hand, ready to go. That's Aroma's fight now.
And now you watch Vitasia and you just feel so bad because you're like, man, you were playing so well and you're just getting completely messed up by just this CPU that just does not want to go away.
Yeah, I think it sort of came down to, you know, both of our runners will have done essentially the exact same checks by the time this race is over. There's not really anything superfluous that either runner has done. Neither got through that Odin throne, neither went up Mount Ordeals, neither went down the Luca cave. And so because of that, it's kind of showing how much those early decisions did impact things. And I think Xyrak going to the moon early on was kind of the key decision at this point. Not to say that it's over, because anything can happen from this point, but it's quite the moment here.
Yeah, you're right. I don't really think there was anything that one did over the other. I think they all basically repeated the exact same steps, just in different orders.
Xyrak going back to Baron to pick up a Soma drop from the item shop, just hand it to Fu, give Fu an extra nuke or whatever you might be casting with him at this point in time. 10 HP is never a bad thing. And heading on over, stopping at Mysidia, maybe stocking up on some other things as well.
Yeah, at this point, you're already done. You're just thinking, okay, I just need a couple more things to make this Z fight really safe for me. Maybe just doing a quick search of items, just trying to find something that might help a little bit. You know, I don't know if it could be Bacchus Wines, it could be maybe Cure 3s. I'm not really sure what specifically Xyrak's looking for at this point, but just trying to find something to make himself feel a little bit more comfortable with whatever's coming here.
Yeah, as chat's pointing out, might be looking for Silk Webs here, and I don't think we have it, so this Zeromus might be quite quick no matter how we go through it, but it's getting to be that time. I almost forgot that there's a whole thing that we have to go through here.
Well, I'm trying to remember. There's some sort of question I think we usually ask before we get to this point, isn't there?
There is. So just to give a bit of context for this big question, it's very, very important one. Zeromus can't be moved, not because it's like a technical problem, really, although it might be. Honestly, I don't know if it is a technical problem, and I've been saying the rest of this, just ignore me. Just an old man rambling. But he's too mean to move around. He's too iconic to move around. He's the end boss of the game. So the wonderful Scala Kitty has given us over 550 different sprites that can be behind this Aroma spot, which does lead to an important question. And CS Radical, would you like to ask that question tonight?
I would. So as we see, oh wow, a pink-haired ready just suddenly turned in there. That was interesting. But in the meantime, since we are at the fabled fight, we have one question left, and that is, whose butt are we gonna kick tonight? And is that butt cute? And as a Gaia Hat representative, does it have a hat? That is the most important question.
Team Hat. I salute you, Team Hat. I have no horse in this race, so I can't favor one group over the other. I am but a wonderful neutral journalist in this particular case, covering this tournament as best as I can.
I am a totally biased journalist here as we do this. I demand my hats.
Just real quick, one note over on Vitasia's side is through that CPU fight is going to be headed into that Ogopogo, not too far behind at this point.
And as we see our sprite for the night, boo. I mean, it looks like a hair hat from here.
Is a headband a hat? And other questions that you might want to ask yourself at some point. Is that a headband or is that just a gem? It is a headband. I do not know what this one is off the top of my head, so if someone could help me out, it'd be very helpful.
I already know that I can't possibly say a headband's a hat because I already said helmets. I had the hot take that helmets don't count, so I can't in good conscience say that a headband is. So no hat.
Tales of Fantasia. Okay, that makes sense. I recognize the sprite style now. So here's the question. How quickly does Xyrak get through this fight? We've seen a lot of Berserker strats on this fight. Unfortunately, Fu gonna fall to that counter nuke into Big Bang combo. How quickly does Reflect strats get you through this fight? Because I think Kane is just gonna be standing there waiting for this to get over. This is interesting. Not interesting in like any sort of negative way, but just how quickly does this go with only 4 characters?
Yeah, it's gonna be not dicey, I don't think, but it's definitely gonna be okay. I gotta optimize a little bit more than I thought I was gonna have to, because you weren't hoping or you weren't expecting that Fu was gonna go down as quickly as he did. You were really hoping to get, I mean, nobody fall, but certainly not Fu, who was gonna be a big key to this fight. So you're still okay, but you're also a little annoyed that you have to do a little bit of extra work now to get things really rolling.
Absolutely. Speaking of really rolling, Vitasia through that CPU fight, through that Ogopogo, going to be getting his crystal as well on the way back down out of the giant. He'll be in this Aromas fight soon. Anything that could go wrong over on Xyrak's side could be handing the race over to Vitasia.
Yeah, and I mean, as it stands, I don't know if I see it, but I mean, stranger things can happen. But the pure damage rolls that those nukes and whites are showing, it's just... unless like a really bad unnerved BB kind of just messes everything up and really throws things for a loop, I just don't know if there's enough that can happen here, but we'll see.
It's hard to say. I think this looks fairly rough at the moment just from the HP values. I know a Big Bang just went off. It's going to depend on how well we can get everyone back up in terms of health. Need to get some HP on that Kane in order to get him through. My big concern is, how fast is this Aromas moving? As that black hole goes off, that Kane's going down now.
Oh yeah, now we're definitely into uh-oh. Now we're starting to wonder. This could get really interesting again all of a sudden.
It really is anyone's race, and every moment, not just that this takes where it's a possibility of having a wipe, but every moment that this takes to recover from this bad situation right now is another second that Vitasia is making up. It's still not entirely over. Obviously, Xyrak has a fairly sizable advantage at this point, but it's still either runner's race right now.
Yeah, and it really just depends on if you're keeping your wall party member up, because Kane was a big key to that, and Kane's down. If this unnerfed nuke or BB goes off and Rhea goes down, you're back to square one again, where you're trying to get things moving.
Doing quite a bit of damage right now. There is the flashes, and that looks like Xyrak is going to take this win, going to make it a three-way tie for second place in the Aegis Shield group. We're going to have a tiebreaker later on in this tournament here. And I believe we are joined by Xyrak for an interview. First of all, GG's and congratulations on your victory.
Thank you very much.
Absolutely. That from our side, I mean, we were sweating a bunch in this race, but that BB that we just saw, Kane going down, there was starting to be a little bit of nerves there. How are you feeling during the course of that Z fight?
There are two bosses who are not on the nice list anymore after this group round for me. One is Zeromus. He has tried every seed he has tried, and CPU, like CPU. Anyone who watched my race versus Elvin knows what happened there, and again, it was showing up in rude spots with mage parties that can't damage it very well. Pretty over it.
So I have a big question that I think kind of sort of set the pace for how this race went between the two of you. What led you to decide to head to the moon when you did?
Two things. One, I knew the fights in the Land of Summon monsters were technically doable, but they were going to be slow, and I wasn't really super looking forward to doing them. Other than that, I think Odin and Ordeals, which I was trying to fade Ordeals, were the only things left on the table. I knew if Sirens were in the seed, they were on the moon, and knowing whether or not they were in the shop was going to sort of set my strategy for how I was going to try and attack the rest of the seed. So I went up there, the Sirens were there, so I was like, okay, let's get Doridia and the Kane online here, and then see what the moon has to offer. And the first few moon bosses were actually pretty free, which helped too.
So, the theme of this seed, apart from, basically telling you that, hey, half of this game isn't important because we're just going to lock away like a good chunk of the dungeons, seemed to be just a lot of locations of bosses that just felt like taking your time. Not necessarily a lot of difficult bosses, just a lot of time waste. You get CPU, you had Golbez and Demas in the Feymarch. You even had a nice little Luge fight in the Super Cannon there. How many, I just want to know, like, on an over-under of 3, how many eye rolls were there after each boss location being discovered?
So CPU was an eye roll, Ogo was an eye roll. The tower was kind of whatever. I actually was fast enough to skip most of the dialogue, so Luge actually wasn't too bad. Man, you set the line really good there at 3. Those are the only 2 that immediately come to mind. The Feymarch bosses were like, whatever. I saw them so early in the seed, I didn't even really give them much thought. If I had not peeked them until later, I probably would have.
Yeah, so one thing worth noting too is, a very big difference between the two of you in terms of party composition, which was partly influenced by the fact that about half an hour in, you kind of branched off from each other and took completely different routes through the seed. But what led you to decide on going with a Reflect party in the end, sort of a mage-heavy composition in this particular race?
The weapons were terrible. Just like, I bought a Gungnir for Kane. I can't tell you the last time I've done that outside of like challenge seeds that somehow had that as an option. Like, I just thought.
Yeah, I think the only like half-decent weapon we saw throughout the sea was Vitasia finding just a random white spear in the Sylph Cave, but otherwise, I don't think we really saw anything like. No, not even defense swords. Like, not really anything too crazy. Oh, and there was a light sword, I believe, in the hairdryer trap. Am I correct on that end?
Yes, but we never found a Cecil. Unless was Cecil from the Giant? I sort of zoned out at that point in time.
No, that was a dupe Sid.
I never saw Cecil, so the only other good weapon I saw was a Murasame off the Baron check, but I didn't get edge until literally the last thing I did in the seed, so yeah, the just Berserker party was just never really on the table. That's why I kind of wanted to know if the Sirens were there or not, because if they weren't there, honestly, like, that would have made things really challenging, because I wouldn't have wanted to do the moon bosses without 10 key items first to speed that up, but yeah, that would have made things challenging. But yeah, just the weapons being bad and like being able to buy the Leviathan for Rydia made her useful early game, so she wasn't like a weight to carry to the end. So just made it work.
Definitely. And with that, you do move to 3-2, which is enough to create a tie for second place in the group. It's going to lead to a tiebreaker and then the play-in match from there. You got those two matches. How are you feeling about your chances of getting through to the bracket stage at this point?
This Aegis Shield has been so ridiculously close. All of our races, like, I haven't been watching all the other groups as closely, but so many of the races in this group are like a few minutes or less every single finish, and of course, and I think the win-loss records bear how close this group was. So this is going to come down to who plays well and who gets lucky in those races. And I mean, I hope it's me, but I'm certainly not going in overflowing with confidence. It's going to be a fight.
It's also got to be a scenario that you aren't 100% too happy with, because the two people in that tiebreaker happen to be the only two people that actually beat you in this group. So
I noticed that. Yeah.
it's an interesting setup to be in, but it makes an interesting question if you're able to get through this. I mean, you're the only person in your group that even was able to defeat Night Dew. So it's kind of an interesting balance where you're the only one that beat the person that's already automatically out of this group, but you're also about to face the two people that took you down in the group stage. So it's this very interesting tiebreaker that we're going to watch. That's also going to be really interesting.
Right. I can take solace in the fact that in both those losses, I definitely made some things that I wouldn't do again. Even at the time that I was doing them, I was thinking, I don't know why I'm doing this. It's a poor decision. So I can take some solace in that. But, I mean, Elvin and Beauty got themselves 3 wins against tough competition. So, yeah, like I said, I'm just going to try and improve what I can improve, and hopefully things roll my way.
Absolutely. Well, I think if you put on, even half as good of a show as you put on today, you've got your very, very tough competition for that race. So just with that, I think it's probably about time to start winding down this particular interview. Did you have any sort of final thoughts for us on this race that you ran today?
No, I'm interested to hear that Vitasia and I did things so very differently. I'll definitely be curious to check it out. I love what I love, like different randoms that I play. So I'm definitely gonna look forward to it, and good luck to Beauty and Elvin when we get around to that race. I just hope I'm a little lucky. That's all.
Absolutely. Well, you only need to be luckier than 1 for the tiebreaker at least. So
yeah.
But then you got to be lucky again. So there you go.
Well, again, GG's, and thank you very much for joining us for this interview. Going on to the tiebreaker that will lead to the play-in match for the brackets from this Aegis Shield group. Thank you again, Xyrak.
No problem. Thanks to everybody who handled the race stream today.
And with that, I believe we are joined by Vitasia. First of all, GG's on a very, very well-run race and a very exciting race to watch today.
Yeah, I heard there was just maybe a thing or two that we did a little bit differently, so I hear.
You split apart at about the half-hour mark and didn't come back together until about an hour and 20 minutes in.
Yeah, that tracks. That was about the point in time when I realized I didn't have any idea what I was doing. I had zero plan moving forward. I'm looking at my tracker going, where the heck am I gonna go? And just like, it felt like I was just throwing darts at a dartboard at some point, like the random top of tower check that I've not, like, that is not a normal check that I do. I was like, well, I feel like I'm lost. Let's just randomly do this.
Makes you feel any better, Xyrak actually did do the keyless tower check as well, so you were
we're not joking. You guys basically did everything together, just at completely different points. I don't think there's anything that you guys did that was different. It was just the order.
That's really interesting to hear. Because I know that I made a deliberate effort to fade Mount Ordeals, for example. There was hide nor hair of any Cecil anywhere. I didn't get any nice weaponry for him, even if he would have shown up. So when we got early Magma Key, at that point I was like, well, we're going to see how long I could avoid doing mountain ordeals, and it was just, by the time I was an hour in and I could go to the moon, I'm like, well, I'm probably never going to do mountain ordeals if I can possibly avoid it, which has absolutely burned some runners in this race. But I figured I was already eliminated from advancing, so hey, let's do it for the lulz and see what happens.
Yeah, like when I really sit down and think about it, I think the only difference is that I can possibly recollect is that you reset out of the top of tower, whereas Xyrak made the walk down because it was good for his foo when he did it. Compared to you two, though, you did the Fey March much earlier. Were you really confident going into those fights were going to be good, or were you just thinking, okay, I need to do these anyway, I might as well get them out of the way, and if I'm really lucky, they're going to lead to something I want?
Well, one of the things that I've learned throughout this tournament is with these flak sets, you want to be as efficient as humanly possible. The fewer times you can go down to the Fey March, the better. They were objectives, and I wanted to get them done relatively early. But more than that, I was already in the underground. I knew I was in that kind of early to mid 30s level where it's like, okay, these might be a little bit difficult, but I can get through them. So I wanted to try to clear out as much of the underworld as I possibly could before getting back into the overworld. So it was really a play to minimize flight time as best as I could, knowing that it might be difficult, but I got to do these anyway. So let's just push through them and see what happens. So that was my thinking going through there.
Yeah, you definitely put on a really good show of getting through all that stuff. Those underground bosses were really rough to get through. You never really want to see King Golbez and Queen Demas down the bottom of the Fey March. And, I think in any given race, maybe if they'd have paid off different key items that led to more than one objective, then this race goes 4 minutes in the other direction. And I think that's definitely something where you made very good choices in doing that.
That's been my story, I think, for most of this tournament. I don't think I've run there's one race that I can remember that I know that I ran just an absolute horrible race. But by and large, I've been very happy with how well I've been playing through this tournament. Just rando's gonna rando just about every race on me, and the routing and the decisions feel good. They just didn't necessarily pan out. So that's gonna happen every now and then when you play a randomizer race. You can't necessarily get yourself down on it. You just have to pick up the pieces and move on. I felt our group as a whole was an incredibly strong group, top to bottom, mixed with some veterans and some new folks that really kind of gave everyone a run for their money. No one escaped unscathed in the group. So it's been an absolute blast, and that's the nature of rando. Sometimes you make some plays, sometimes you're gonna get randed.
Or in this specific case, you guys basically follow the same path and then cause, especially me, I can't speak for Nth, but just have absolute just heart rates all over the place because we have no idea who's actually running in the lead because it looks so close throughout the entirety of the race, which just made this such an enjoyable race. But yeah, fantastically run. As a newer runner, to watch what was a really difficult set of bosses, in some cases hard, some cases just aggravatingly long. That CPU at Elements just being the big one. In that boss specifically, because I want to get into your mindset of what you're thinking. How were you thinking, seeing how long this fight was taking? Was that starting to really weigh on your mind, thinking you were starting to fall behind with this fight?
See, what goes through my mindset whenever there's a really difficult boss in a spot that we have to go through, right? It's in any randomizer, whether it's free enterprise, whether it's Z3, in any sort of race, it is not necessarily what you do, but what you do different from your opponent. And in this race, with that kind of frustrating of a boss, I'm sitting here thinking, okay, I have 3 melee fighters and a foo who can heal. The only thing that was frustrating to me about that was Foo's magic pool because I was worried. I was like running out of magic to be able to heal. But I had 3 melee, so and they were, one could jump, one could punch, and the other one, could throw darts if I had any darts. But it was overall a pretty decent setup. So even though that particular CPU fight was probably frustrating to watch just because it was a bit of a slog, I was confident because I felt like my party was more optimized than other party comps that could be going through there. I think I talked with Xyrak a little bit, and he was doing kind of a mage party. That would be the worst setup for that kind of CPU fight, unless you're going to try to do float reflex tracks, for example. So, that's the nature of Rando, and I felt, even though it was a slog, I felt I was probably set up pretty well for it compared to what the other options were.
Definitely. And with that, unfortunately, that is going to be the end of your tournament on the playing side, but we do look very much forward to having you back on the restream side of things as well, a bit more, hopefully, with the, not competing at this point. But you ran very, very good races in all of your races that I saw, and I just want to ask, do you have any final thoughts for us tonight?
No, it's been a fantastic tournament. The admins always get together and put a new wrinkle into free enterprise so that it's always just a little bit different to keep everyone on their toes. I really appreciate that. It keeps it fresh. Shout out to all of the tourney admins who do all the work behind the scenes, so much work that they can't even race, even though they enjoy the game just as much as the rest of us. And then, of course, all the restream crews, my fellow commentators and trackers, and the restream folks. It takes a ton of work to put effort into something like this for a community, and it feels good to be a part of a community that is willing to just kind of pool our resources together and put on a show like this. So looking forward to getting back in the booth and putting my controller down, because I've probably broken it seeing one too many Eddie starts and squeezing it far too hard. But no, GG's to everyone, and looking forward to the next race.
Absolutely. And like we said earlier, GG's for a fantastic race. Congrats on getting through the group stage, regardless of your record not getting you into the tiebreaker stage, but still running a fantastic tournament. And yeah, we'll see you in the booth soon, hopefully, as I enjoyed my time with you as well. But yeah, congratulations on the entire tournament. We'll see you further down as we start continuing the broadcast as we get towards the brackets.
Sounds great. Take care, everyone.
And with that, I believe that is going to be the end of our stream and the end of the streams for the Aegis Shield group here in this Adamant Cup group stage. Well, I'd like to give a thank you to both of our runners who put on one of the absolute most interesting and exciting races I've seen throughout this tournament. Just absolutely brilliant the entire time through. And also to the behind the scenes team here, Neobari on the restream and Black Ice on the tracking. And a thank you again to my commentary partner tonight, CS Radical. And got any final thoughts for us tonight, CS?
I'm just happy that my heart rate's gone back down. I'm doing good again. I can breathe a little bit better now. What a race that was. That was tremendous and an absolute joy to watch.
That's right. We do have a tiebreaker to do for the Aegis Shield group. That's right. Thank you for pointing that out. And with that, we are going to send you on over to Free Enterprise 2. We have the match between John Burkhead and Mechalink on the, I believe it's Artemis Bow group. Remember, no spoilers for this race, because anyone who did not watch this race is probably going to want to watch it back when they hear about it. And we will see you over there. And if not, see you in the next one. Have a good night, everyone.